I'm going to start the meeting in 5 minutes at 9:06.
Somewhere else?
Good morning, folks. We're going to start the meeting in 1 minute at 9:06. We'll be starting the meeting in 1 minute. Good morning. We're going to start the meeting. I'm going to give the floor to the Secretariat for some housekeeping.
Good morning, colleagues. We are a little pressed for time, so we're going to start. And please find your seats. One small housekeeping announcement: the executive summary of yesterday morning is available online. So that's the summary record of the executive summary of yesterday morning. Sum 3 is available online. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Wednesday. I have a few notes before we get started today. As the Secretariat had just stated, we are a little behind in our schedule, almost a full day behind, and so I'm going to ask for your support as I make it through this agenda. That is my aim, and my charge is to work us through this agenda, and so I am asking for your support to focus interventions on the recommendations in the document. Again, to align yourself with others when you make your interventions, and if you can keep them as brief as possible, that would also be appreciated. And when we're making interventions, I'm looking for new information or new points of view, as opposed to, restating a point of view that has already been expressed and noted on the floor. So I am ambitiously looking at this Wednesday, and we'll see what we can achieve. I will regroup with the Secretariat at lunch and see how much progress we have made this morning, and come back to you guys with options if needed. Okay, so we will start today where we left off yesterday with agenda item 58, review of CITES provisions related to trade in specimens of animals and plants not of wild source. And I give the floor to the Secretary to Canada as the chair of the working group.
Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate your desire for progress and congratulate you on your smooth and thorough handling of the meeting thus far. We are in good hands. I will be introducing SC 77 Doc 58 on behalf of Canada and Belgium as co-chairs of the working group on trade in non-wild source animals and plants. As noted, the working group was struck at SC 76 with a mandate to address issues as presented in Decision 19.179. As a first step, the working group was asked to agree a modus operandi and roadmap for continuing the review of trade in specimens of CITES-listed animals and plants not of wild source. A draft roadmap was prepared and shared with members of the working group, as well as with the Animals and Plants Committee, to inform their implementation of Decision 19.180. The roadmap proposed a stepwise approach to review the implementations of Article 7, paragraphs 4 and 5, by first elucidating some of the key principles underpinning trade in specimens of non-wild source. Subsequently, the proposal would suggest the working group more directly consider the provisions in the Convention and approach for NDFs and legal acquisition findings. While there was good support for this approach, there were some members of the working group that indicated a preference to begin with the consideration of provisions. My co-chair and I are in the process of reviewing the roadmap in response to comments received so that the working group can begin their substantive discussions of this complex issue. Additionally, my co-chair and I are working in close collaboration with the chairs of the Animals Committee and Plants Committee Intersessional Working Group on this topic and look forward to the results of their deliberations. In conclusion, Chair, we invite the Standing Committee to take note of the report, and we look forward to presenting the outcomes of the working group at the 78th meeting of the Standing Committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Canada, and thank you, Belgium, for chairing this intersessional working group. I will open the floor now to comments from the Standing Committee. Poland, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We would like to emphasize that the work of the group is crucial to discuss important issues of provisions related to trade in specimens not of wild source, which is also interlinked to other items on the agenda of the meeting. Given the yesterday discussion and the fact that this group was established, mean that there are still unresolved issues with the uniform implementation of relevant CITES provisions and resolutions. Therefore, we are looking forward to the continuation of work of this important working group. Thank you.
Thank you, Poland. I open the floor to member observer parties for comments. Observer organizations. The committee notes the document. With that, we have concluded this agenda item and we'll move on to agenda item number 59, review of resolution of Conf 12.10, Rev Cop 15, and I give the floor to the United States as the chair of the working group.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As chair of the Standing Committee's Intersessional Working Group on this issue, the United States is pleased to introduce document SC 77, Doc 59. At its 19th meeting, the Conference of the Parties adopted Decision 19.181 on review of Resolution Conf 1210, Rev Cop 15, on registration of operations that breed Appendix 1 animal species in captivity for commercial purposes, which directs the Standing Committee to, taking in consideration document COP 19, Doc 55, review the application of Resolution Conf 12.10 for situations where there is a change in the nature of the operation or in the types of products being produced for export and other matters raised in the COP 19 document as appropriate, and provide its recommendations to the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. In order to fulfill its mandate, the Standing Committee at its 76th meeting established an intersessional working group comprising 31 parties and 19 observer organizations. In undertaking the tasks of the working group, we sought input from working group members on a number of items, including A, whether other types of changes to a registered operation constitute a major change in the nature of an operation or in the types of products being produced for export. B, whether information on type of product approved for export should be included in the information on a registered operation published on the CITES webpage. C, whether a new annex to Resolution Conf 12.10 should be adopted to clarify the process for obtaining information from parties relating to major changes in the nature of an operation or the type of products being produced for export. D, whether the continuing meaningful contribution a captive breeding operation should make to the conservation needs of the species should include ensuring that trade from the registered operation will not negatively affect efforts to combat illegal trade in this species or other CITES-listed species. And finally, whether there are other matters raised in document COP 19, Doc 55, that the working group should consider. In response to this initial communication, we received 6 responses from parties and 10 responses from non-party members of the working group. Working group members expressed a variety of viewpoints, including additional reflections and perspectives from those raised at COP 19. Some of the issues raised had considerable support, such as publishing details of the register on the CITES webpage. On some issues, working group members suggested simpler alternatives as compared to document COP 19, Doc 55, to avoid substantial revisions to the annexes to the resolution or adding additional review processes or administrative burdens. Working group members also expressed little support and some opposition to other suggestions, including the adoption of a complete re-registration process for every major change, or the adoption of a new annex for amendments to registrations. Responses to the specific areas of consideration are summarized in document SC 77, Doc 59. The committee is invited to note this interim report of the working group and provide any advice or comments on the document or process to date. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, United States, and thank you for leading this working group. I will open the floor up to members of the Standing Committee for any comments. I give the floor to Japan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We appreciate the discussion of working group to clarify the procedures for the registration operations. We would like to make a comment on the inclusion of the types of products being produced for the export into the registration. The registration rule should be designed to avoid the unnecessary disturbance on the trade. Namely, registration with wide range of products which covers enough products for the operations, maybe including their future plan, should be accepted, or easy procedures to change the registered products should be provided. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Japan. I give the floor to the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Chair, and to your colleagues in the United States as well for progressing this important area coming out of COP19. We agree that if a registration process for captive bred specimens of Appendix 1 species is to be effective, parties should consider some updates to Resolution Conf 1210. Conscious that this working group has not completed its deliberations and the divergent views of different working group members to date, we have some comments on the progress reported in the document. We agree that some changes to breeding facilities may be substantive enough to merit a review or update of facilities registration, but we're concerned with the administrative burden of a full re-registration process. And so we would encourage the working group to develop a clear, simple, and not overly burdensome proposal. We can see the benefit of including information on the types of products produced at registered breeding facilities and draw parallels with the draft recommendations in SC 77 Doc 61 relating to the use of phytosanitary certificates in lieu of certain CITES documents. We think more discussion is needed in the working group to identify difficulties with meeting paragraph 5J of Resolution 1210 regarding registered facilities making a continuing and meaningful contribution to the conservation of the species, in order for the working group to provide constructive recommendations to the COP. And the working group discussion should align with recommendation 90 from document 33.8 agreed yesterday. Indeed, we note this requirement to demonstrate a meaningful contribution to the conservation of the species appears to go beyond the requirements under Articles 7, 4, and 5 of the Convention. As touched on yesterday, more generally, the UK is of the long-standing opinion that the registration process for animals in Resolution Conf 1210 is unnecessarily complicated, especially when compared to the much simpler registration process afforded to plants under Resolution Conf 919. Furthermore, it creates, as it's drafted, or as the process exists, it creates a lot of work for the parties and Secretariat, with our view, no obvious extra benefit from some parts of the process. So it may come as, not come as surprising that we have some concerns with the universal applicability of a one-size-fits-all approach, but we will work constructively with the members of the working group to identify solutions that all parties can support and put to the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. Thank you.
Thank you, the United Kingdom. Opening the floor for comments from observer parties. Observer organizations. The European Union, you have the floor.
Good morning. Thank you, President. I will be speaking in Spanish. Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The EU and its member states would like to thank the working group and its chair for the work done under this mandate with respect to the registration of operations that breed Appendix 1 species. The EU agrees with the proposal that the Standing Committee take note of this report. We would like to stress the general idea that most members of the working group were not in favor of a re-registration process unless there is a significant change to the operation or its products. The EU and its member states does not think that there should be a registration process that's mandatory for operations that are already registered. If there is a problem, Resolution 1210 already provides for ways of tackling any issues that come up. Any party that considers that a registered operations is not complying with the provisions of 1016 can hold consultations with the Secretariat and the party concerned and make the suggestion that this operation be struck from the register. There are different proposals made here which can broadly consider significant or important, and we are not in agreement with those considerations. We don't want burdensome bureaucratic requirements. We think that the question of updating information on captive breeding facilities is only necessary if a change has been made that could actually undermine the operations' ability to meet the requirements of registration, which is why we think these issues should be tackled. We would also oppose the proposals made by just one member of the working group to have more information provided when an operation is registered. We think things should be streamlined. We would like to inform you to IMFDoc 50, which we submitted to COP19. We give detailed information there about the view of the EU and its member states with respect to amendments to COMP for Resolution 1210. IMFDoc is still current and we still stand by it. We look forward to the continuing work of this working group. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, the European Union. I give the floor to Mexico.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Madam, and good morning, everyone. We would like to express our agreement with what was said by the European Union. We think that the registration of these operations should be straightforward. We would not agree with the proposal of having a re-registration process that would complicate matters. We think that we should ensure that we have a maximum number of operations that breed these species be registered and that be done in as simple a way as possible. We think that what we already have in the resolution is enough to enable us to tackle situations that might crop up in the future. So we would agree that the Standing Committee take note of the work done, and we would certainly agree with the working group for continuing its consideration of these issues, but we do think that we have enough already to be getting on with. Thank you.
Mexico, and I'm going to close the list for speakers and give the floor to AWI.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm making this intervention on behalf of a number of observer organizations, and I will provide the full list to the Secretariat. I would like to first thank the United States for its leadership of this working group and for preparing SC 77 Doc 59. The robust implementation of ResComp 1210, Rev COP 15 is vital to ensure commercial trade in captive bred specimens of Appendix 1 species does not threaten the conservation of their wild conspecifics. We note the request in the document for the Standing Committee to provide any relevant advice to the working group, which will continue its intersessional work and provide recommendations to SC 78. We recommend that the Standing Committee emphasizes to the working group the importance of, first, identifying the specific specimens or products approved for export on the CITES registration website. Second, developing and agreeing to a comprehensive definition of what is understood by major changes. And third, putting safeguards in place to ensure that trade from a registered operation will not negatively affect efforts to address illegal wildlife trade. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, AWI. So the recommendation is to note the document. So the committee notes the document with the comments that are made on the floor by AWI, Mexico, the EU, Japan, and the United Kingdom. Thank you. With that, I have concluded item 59, and we will move on to item 33.5, Article 13 in China, application of Article 13 in China, and I give the floor to the Secretariat.
Good morning, Chair, and good luck for today. Good morning, all. I wish to introduce document 33.5 on the application of Article 13 in China. This document was prepared in conjunction with document 33.10 on the application of Article 13 in the Lao People's Democratic Republic, particularly paragraph 20 of that document and the recommendations regarding Asian elephants. The Secretariat has shared the draft of this report with China for factual corrections before writing the recommendations. And after publishing the document, the Secretariat reached out to China for any queries or advice needed. In this connection, the Secretariat invites the attention of the committee to Information Document 25, which contains the statement made by China in relation with this agenda item. We hope that the Secretariat document and the information document submitted by China will support the committee in agreeing on its final recommendations. Let me start by thanking China for its excellent cooperation within the framework of the technical mission and commending them for their commitment to CITES implementation. The Secretariat was impressed by many programs put in place and the organization of certain CITES offices as described in the document. The committee may recall that the matter of trade of live Asian elephants from the Lao People's Democratic Republic to China was brought to the attention of the Standing Committee for the first time in 2017 at its 69th meeting in a report on the application of Article 13 in the Lao PDR. The Secretariat would like to highlight that the transactions concerned by this report occurred in 2014, 2015, and the export permits issued by Lao for Asian elephants using purpose code B and source code C, and the import permits issued by China with the similar information were shared with the Secretariat during the mission. So this is about transactions that occur in the past and that in the understanding of the Secretariat ceased to occur in 2019. China is invited to provide further information to the committee in this regard. After the review of the matter in Lyon last year at the 74th meeting of the Standing Committee, it was agreed that the Secretariat should continue to keep close communication and strengthen the cooperation with China and Lao PDR on this potential case and seek an invitation from China and Lao to provide in-country assistance, conduct a technical mission and a verification mission to understand the type of trade controls that are put in place once the specimens have been introduced to ensure compliance with Article 3 with respect to the import of live Asian elephants. On 17 August 2022, the Secretariat sent a letter to the CITES Management Authority of China communicating the recommendation of the Standing Committee, raising the questions highlighted in paragraph 11 of the present document, and seeking an invitation to conduct a verification mission to China. On 30 June 2023, China extended an invitation to conduct a mission. And following the invitation received from the Chinese authorities, the CITES Secretariat conducted a technical mission to China from 23 to 29 July this year. Field visits were made to the Wild Elephant Valley at Sichuanbana Nature Reserve and to Shanghai Wild Animal Park. Regarding the reporting of the number of live elephants imported, this matter was clarified and is considered solved. In the discussion of the Secretariat with China, the further information they provided, the Secretariat believed that it will be very helpful to clarify and resolve also the other two issues that are for consideration at the present meeting. Paragraph 36 to 42 of the document provides the Secretariat's findings regarding the use of source code C for trade of live Asian elephants from Lao PDR to China. We The Secretariat considers that the correct use of the source code is critical in the determination of the regime that applies to a transaction. With regard to China as the state of import, it's recalled that the import of live Asian elephants is governed by Article 3, Paragraph 3, subparagraph C of the Convention, and which is in relation to Resolution Conf 5.10, which reminds the parties of the fundamental principle in Article 2, Paragraph 1 of the Convention that trade in specimens of Appendix 1 species must be subject to particularly strict regulation and only authorized in exceptional circumstances. Regarding the Appendix 1, Asian elephants imported from the Lao PDR to China, in the follow-up discussion with the Secretariat, it was explained by China that no more live Asian or African elephant imports have been approved since August 2019. If China confirms that this is the case and that no imports of Asian elephants under Code C will be authorized in the future unless they are in conformity with the definition of captive breeding contained in Resolution Conference 10.16, this issue could be also considered solved. Paragraph 43 to 50 of the document provides the Secretariat's findings regarding trade controls related to Paragraph C of Article 3, Paragraph 5, that are only relevant for this specific case. Again, each case is unique and only for the transactions described in the document. On the basis of the elements gathered during the technical mission, the Secretariat has formulated some recommendations for the consideration of the Standing Committee as set out in Paragraph 53 to 54. Madam Chair, the Standing Committee is invited to consider recommendations also in Paragraph 56, which includes to determine that Article 3 and Article 7, Paragraph 5 of the Convention were not effectively implemented in the case of these transactions from law that occurred in 2014 and 2015, in particularly concerning these two main elements: the evidence that the specimens don't meet the definition of breeding activity in accordance with the criteria set out in Resolution Conf 10.15, but this is again about Article 7.5 and Article 3. Resolutions just provide interpretations. Obviously, interpretations are not binding. Interpretations adopted by the Conference of the Parties, which is the supreme body of this treaty, on the text of the Convention. And the second element, if we understand that China imported these animals with the understanding that they were bred in captivity, is not longer relevant for the discussion today if these transactions are not happening anymore, but it should be noted that the Secretariat's findings conclude that these specimens, the Asian elephants from Laos are very difficult to breed in captivity and that they are not corresponding to the definition of captive breeding that is included in the Resolution 10.16. Finally, the Secretariat recommends Paragraph C, and we suggest a changing of the words because perhaps that may be misunderstood, to change the words action plan for initiative or program of cooperation with the neighboring country. And finally, Madam Chair, the Secretariat invites the committee to commend the Yunnan Provincial Forest Grassland Administration for the compensation scheme for the losses caused by Asian elephants through an insurance scheme which can serve as an inspiring model to address human-wildlife conflict or negative interactions in other parts of the world. The Standing Committee is also invited to commend the Shanghai branch of the CITES Management Authority of China for its efficient organization of the CITES documentation, the training facilities, and the outreach material produced. They should also serve as an inspiring model for the issuing, handling, and recording of CITES permits and related information for other CITES offices in the world. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. I now give the floor to China.
China draws all participants' attention to IC 77 Inf. 25, in which China presented its major points of view as follows. First, neither in IC 77 Doc 33.5 nor in Doc 33.10 did the Secretariat present solid evidence or definitive information on the source of the Laos elephant exported to China, despite this critical nature of such information. In addition, whether Asian elephants in Laos were or were not captive bred, in line with the provision of Resolution COF 10.16, was not questioned by relevant parties, organizations, nor by the Secretariat at the time when the trade occurred. The absence of comments or questions was therefore taken as confirmation that the trade was in accordance with prevailing regulations. Second, China imported the elephants after confirming the authenticity and validity of the Asia elephant breeding certificate issued by Laos, subject to paragraph 5, article 7. Third, China imported Asian elephants for purpose Z or B, and the elephant recipient are suitably equipped to house and care for them. All of us in this room would agree that it is common practice for zoos worldwide to charge admission fee, which are not regarded as business under purpose Z, and is therefore not primarily commercial. Fourth, China has voluntarily suspended the import of live Asian elephants since 2019. Fifth, since 2006, China and Laos have cooperated in building transboundary conservation areas for Asian elephants. Bilateral meetings were held annually. Therefore, China suggests recommendation sections in SC 77 Doc 33.5 be replaced by the following. The Standing Committee to number 1, take note of the information contained in this document and SC 77 Inf. 25. Number 2, take note of that China has suspended the import of live Asian elephants since 2019. Number 3, take note of the continuous cooperation between China and Laos on Asian elephant conservation and encourage further efforts. Number 4, explore a scientific and robust way to review and determine the source code to be applied to the exportation of live Asian elephant from Laos. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, China. I now open the floor to comments from members of the Standing Committee. I give the floor to Kuwait.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of some of the Asia region member states. I would like to support the statement made by China and emphasize on the matter that Purpose Z cannot interpret as a primary commercial. Zoos all around the world are educational as well used for a captive breeding and scientific research purpose. We would like to recommend that the CITES Secretariat might want to take further investigation in that matter for the Purpose Z and come back in the next Standing Committee meeting. Thank you, Chair.
I give the floor to Poland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the analysis of the Secretariat focuses on two elements to be assessed. As for the first element, whether or not source code C is the appropriate source code used for the Asian elephants from Laos PDR, applied in accordance with criteria of Resolution COF 10.16, we consider that the document does not provide enough information for the Standing Committee to make these conclusions. We therefore ask for Lao PDR and/or the Secretariat to provide additional information with regard to the breeding in captivity of the elephants in question. Notably, if mating took place in a controlled environment, if the breeding stock was maintained without the introduction of specimens from the wild, except for the occasional addition of animals in a manner not detrimental to the survival of the species in the wild, and if the breeding stock has already produced an F2 generation or is managed in a manner that has been demonstrated to be capable of reliably producing F2 generation. If it is not possible to clearly make this determination within this meeting, we would like to inquire about the possibility of involving the Animals Committee in the assessment on whether the criteria set out in Resolution Conf 10.16 were met in this case. Furthermore, we would like to ask for looking into possibility to select the species-country combination, Elephas maximus, Lao PDR, and maybe also other Asian countries that breed the species in captivity, as an additional case for review under Resolution Conf 17.7 in the new iteration, noting that the Standing Committee is invited to select further species-country combination for the review process under document 36. Madam Chair, as for the second element to be considered, concerning primarily commercial nature of the facilities housing the elephants, we also feel more detailed information is needed to understand the Secretariat's conclusion. This is an important discussion, and trade towards and between zoos is often a complex issue, where a balance needs to be found between the commercial aspects of zoos asking for entry fees against the scientific, conservation and educational work a zoo can undertake. It seems inappropriate to make a quick decision on this matter. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Poland. I now give the floor to Japan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As a member of the Asia region, Japan supports the comment made by Kuwait. Thank you.
Thank you, Japan. And I would just like to narrow the conversation and the discussion to these actual facilities noted in the document. And it's not an implication on all zoos and zoo transfers. We're talking about the two facilities that the Secretariat visited in China, and that's noted in the document. I give the floor to the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Chair. We thank the Secretariat for SC 77 Doc 33.5 and China for working constructively with the Secretariat to investigate this issue. We agree with the Secretariat's conclusion that the elephants historically exported from the Lao People's Democratic Republic into China do not appear to have met the definition of bred in captivity in accordance with the criteria set out in Resolution Conf 10.16. We agree that the resolution in relation to this issue would be to halt any further imports into China of live elephants from Laos. We note in the information doc, Inf Doc 25 and in the interventions provided by China and the Secretariat that China has already indicated that a voluntary halt to such imports is already in place, and that China will no longer authorize imports of wild Asian elephants from the Lao People's Democratic Republic that are to be used for primarily commercial purposes under Source Code C. We consider it preferable for remedial actions to be voluntary from parties concerned where possible, rather than directive from the Standing Committee. If China agrees to for such a ban to remain in place and not be lifted without prior notification to the Secretariat and Standing Committee Chair, we would be content not to pursue measures in Res Conf 14.3 as proposed in Draft Recommendation B. In relation to the export of these specimens from Laos, we note that this continues to be examined under a separate Article 13 case. Finally, we support the draft recommendations C and D as examples of good practice and collaboration that will benefit the conservation of Asian elephants. Thank you.
Thank you, the United Kingdom. I give the floor to... I'm going to open the floor to observer parties. And give the floor to Lao PDR.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving Lao the floor. So since this is the first time in these meetings, my delegation is taking the floor. I would like to take the opportunity to thank you for sharing these important meetings again. So regarding the item SC Doc 33 and 35, 33.5 and Doc 33.10, Lao would like to provide an additional comment. Laos note that the Secretariat did not present solid evidence on the source of the Lao elephant export to China. It is too premature to determine that this elephant must be wild. The Asian elephant that export to China between 2010 and 2018 belong to the Lao people who raised them more than 100 years ago. I would like to say that Lao PDR, the elephant, has been raised for centuries, being integral to society in utility, ceremony, symbolism, as a compromise and pragmatic solution to this issue. Lao requests the Standing Committee to invite the Secretariat to further cooperate with Laos and relevant importing country in consultation with the animal committees to present any further information to the next meeting of Standing Committee. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Lau. I now give the floor to the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Democratic Republic of Congo has closely followed the report presented by the Secretariat in Doc 33.5 and has also read with interest the Inf Doc 25 presented by China. My country thinks that China has suspended, as it said in its comments, the trade of live Asian elephants since 2019. So it shouldn't be asked to take any compliance measures because the trade has ceased. We also think that imports of live Asian elephants under Code Z should not be considered as being traded. So we support the comments made by China in their document Inf Doc 25. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, the DRC. I give the floor now to the United States.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We would like to align ourselves with many of the comments made here with regard to this agenda item. In particular, we agree that based on the information provided, it does appear that the elephants imported from Lao PDR to China do not meet the CITES definition of bred in captivity. And we're pleased to hear that China has suspended imports since 2019, and we would suggest that no further imports from Lao PDR be authorized under source code C until this issue is resolved. To that end, we also support the recommendation from the colleagues from the European region that the species country combination be considered for inclusion in the review process under Resolution Comp 17.7. We also note that in the document there's a couple of references to a lease program that the animals were exported from Laos to China under a lease program, and that those leases will be expiring soon, and we would appreciate receiving additional information on that. With regard to the Secretariat's assertion that the Chinese facilities housing the imported live Asian elephants are primarily commercial in nature, we agree with the comments that based on the information provided in the document and pending further information, we do not support at this time finding that those operations are primarily commercial in nature. And as other speakers have suggested, we would appreciate receiving additional information from the Secretariat and/or China that could be considered by the Standing Committee at its 78th meeting. Finally, we also support encouraging China to develop an initiative with cooperative measures to support in situ conservation of Asian elephants in Lao PDR. And then we also heartily agree with the Secretariat's recommendation to applaud the Shanghai branch of the Chinese Management Authority for its permits system, as well as commend the Yunnan Provincial Forest Grassland Administration for its human-elephant conflict compensation scheme. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, the United States. I now give the floor to New Zealand.
Oh, sorry. Oceania thanks the Secretariat for its thorough assessment of the basis of the technical missions, and we thank China for providing further information, and we understand that they had simply accepted the source codes provided by the exporting party. On that basis, we align with others that, on the two main elements, that the elephants did not meet the definition of captive bred as set out in Resolution Conf 1016 Rev Cop 19. And we can agree with others that there's not enough information to determine this particular trade was for primarily commercial purposes. We note that China advises they have not imported any elephants from Lao Republic since 2019, and so the request to immediately suspend imports of wild elephants from Lao Republic may be redundant. We would also like to commend the Yuan Provincial Forest Grasslands Administrative Compensation Scheme that addresses the human-wildlife conflict. Thank you.
Thank you, New Zealand. I give the floor to Burkina Faso.
Merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Burkina Faso would firstly like to commend the Secretariat for their detailed report on this important issue. As a country of as a range state for African elephants, we are also concerned with trade of live elephants in general. We would also like to congratulate China for voluntarily suspending imports of live elephants since 2019. However, in this Doc 33.5, there are a number of issues that are raised that involve both parties regarding the use of source code C and the use of elephants for a primarily commercial nature. These elephants did not fulfill these conditions, so we agree with the Secretariat that in this precise case, Article 3 and Article 7, Paragraph 5, have not been correctly applied. We support the recommendations of the Secretariat and suggest that the Standing Committee adopt one or several of the measures in Paragraph 29 and 30 of the Annex to Conf 14.3 Rev Cop 19 on the procedures for the CITES compliance procedures. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Burkina Faso. I'll give the floor now to Senegal, and I'm going to close the list for comments.
Merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to make a general comment on this issue. Under Article 8, it says that parties should take the necessary measures to respect the provisions of trade. It highlights the obligations for importers and exporters to ensure respect of the species and what the parties should do to ensure this. To implement the CITES Convention, all parties have to abide by their obligations. When a party identifies an issue with the import of a species or another, CITES can look at whether there has been an issue in that trade and examine the exporter country. sometimes this can be put to the side in different discussions and isn't highlighted in compliance. Madam Chair, if there is a compliance issue and it concerns the origin country, and the country does nothing to help the importer country, the mutual implementation of conformance measures between importer and exporter countries is key to fight against wild species trafficking. So we recommend the Secretariat to prioritize this, and we strongly support the document in question and the recommendations of the Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you, Senegal. I will give the floor next to Vietnam.
Madam Chair, Vietnam will be aligned with comment 1 and 2 made by China in their intervention in taking note of relevant information documents and taking note that China has reported the suspensions of import of live Asian elephants since 2019, and we support this decision of China. We also support further work by the Secretariat in cooperation with Laos, PDR, and China on the subjects. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Vietnam. I give the floor to Canada.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I won't repeat many of the points already raised. Canada does want to thank China for their input and their cooperation with the Secretariat during their mission. And like New Zealand, we commend the Yunnan Provincial Forest Grasslands Administration for their innovative programs to address human-wildlife conflict regarding Asian elephant. With many others, Canada does feel that there was an incorrect application of source code C, and that can be further discussed, I think, under document 33.10. And so we considered this particular case in the context of the obligations under Article 3 and the question of the purpose of import. Like many others, we feel that not enough information was provided to indicate that the two facilities were importing these animals for primarily commercial purposes. And while we do take your point about the two facilities, we also do view the analysis of the Secretariat in the context of zoos broadly, as it would be indicative. And so again, we don't think that the charging of entry fees is a sufficient balance to determine that zoos are primarily commercial. So in that regard, we note the comments China made in terms of alternative recommendations, and we would agree to note that China has confirmed that they have ceased the importation of live elephants, and note their continuing cooperation with Laos. I believe China suggested some additional discussion on source code C. We don't think that that is needed. And I think I caught all of the others. Apologies if I didn't. So with that, Chair, we prefer the general recommendations from China to take note of some of these actions and do not agree with the recommendations in paragraph A as provided by the Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you, Canada. I give the floor next to Cambodia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As a member of the Standing Committee, distinguished colleagues, good morning. Cambodia would like to intervene support to China. The above ASEAN elephant, Agenda Item 33.5, Document 33.10, following the progress report made, we agree with China that the report completes insufficient data collection and some important information is missing. And thus, the document 33.10 is sub-key. Therefore, we encourage the Standing Committee request the Secretariat to further data collection and report to the next meeting. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And I give the floor to AZA.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This intervention is made on behalf of the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, the European Association of Zoos and Aquariums, Wildlife Conservation Society, and the World Association of Zoos and Aquariums. We would like to align ourselves with the views of Canada and several others with regard to the question of whether the Secretariat's analysis of the question of not for primarily commercial purposes is adequate here. The Secretariat notes in paragraph 48 that it is common practice for zoos and safari parks around the world to charge entrance fees, and the determination of primarily commercial purpose depends on several circumstances. In other words, charging an entrance fee is not dispositive regarding the question of commerciality and is at most a factor to consider. And yet, in paragraph 52, entry fees seem to be the only factor supporting a finding that the activity is primarily commercial. We are not arguing that the specific entities in question are or are not engaged in activities that are primarily commercial. Rather, we believe the information presented in the document fails to present a compelling case either way. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, AZA. I'm going to open the floor now to observer organizations and call on IWMC and close the list for comments.
IWMC. Merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The document before us today clearly has some connection to yesterday's discussions as we're talking about live animals. Sometimes you get the impression that positions on trade between the Lao PDR and China are not the same as the discussions we had yesterday on trade in parrots. And there may be some discrepancies with respect to captive breeding. Now, I think there is something that has to be acknowledged, and it may have been said already. There's some contradiction between para 19 of this document, where it is clearly said that China has not imported any specimens for 4 years now, and paragraph 56A and B in particular, where China is asked to suspend imports with immediate effect. It seems to me that it would be clear to everybody that these two paragraphs are in contradiction and there's a need for considerable amendment to the language. I don't know that this is the time to start looking at the definition of bred in captivity. Clearly, the way things are done in the Lao PDR does not seem to correspond to what is required in the resolution on breeding in captivity, because this is not a closed in a closed environment. However, there may be some interest in looking at that because it does seem to have some connection to the whole ranching issue. For some time, CITES looked at captive breeding as a process that was in favor of species conservation, because if there was an acceptance of long-term captive breeding, there was no need for having a wild population. With ranching, there is some support to the wild population, and in the Lao PDR, if there is breeding partly in the wild, it is because there is a need for having wild elephant populations, which may well contribute to regional biodiversity. Now, these two situations may not be identical, but discussions need to be pursued. It seems to me that China's proposed recommendation does seem to be close to what China suggested when they took the floor. I don't think that we should go with the kind of language we have in the text. It should be more rational. I won't go back on yesterday's discussions on shall or should.
Thank you, IWMC. Just 1 second. So just summarizing some of the things that I heard, I'm hearing that the committee does not have enough information to make the determination on whether or not those facilities were for primarily commercial purposes based on the information that's provided in the document. I heard some discussion about whether or not the breeding practices regarding the elephants in the document conform to Resolution 1016 and a possible submitting that to the Animals Committee. I also heard a lot of Standing Committee members are able to make that determination based on the information in the document. I hear a lot of support and appreciation to China for their voluntary suspension of trade in live elephants with source code C. And so I guess my summary would be revising the recommendation in 56 and to be the Standing Committee determines that the specimens of live Asian elephants imported by China from Lao PDR did not meet the definition of bred in captivity in accordance with the criteria set out in Resolution Comp 10.16, Rev Cop 19, and notes with appreciation the voluntary suspension by China of trade in live elephants from Lao PDR under source code C. And then we have the revised recommendation in C to encourage China to continue their collaboration with Lao PDR on the conservation of live Asian elephants, and D as written in the document. And I'm looking to the committee to see if they have support for that. I did hear something regarding referring Asian elephants to 17.7 for a new species country combination. However, in that resolution, if they're already under an Article 13 process, that it's not necessarily appropriate because it's being handled there. And so if the committee is okay with the revised recommendation for 56, the revised recommendation for C, and D as it stands in the document. Okay. With that, I have closed this agenda item, and we move on to the next agenda item, 39.3, CITES Big Cat Task Force. And I give the floor to the Secretariat.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Document 39.3 on the CITES Big Cat Task Force has been submitted by the Secretariat and reports on the implementation of Decision 19.92. The CITES Big Cat Task Force meeting was convened by the Secretariat in Entebbe, Uganda, in end of April 2023. The Secretariat would like to thank Uganda that hosted the meeting and the United States of America for the generous funding it provided to support the implementation of Decision 19.92. The outcome document agreed by the task force meeting is presented in the annex to the present document. It outlines measures and activities to be undertaken to address the following key topics: strengthening effective implementation and enforcement of the Convention with regards to illegal trade in big cat specimens, strengthening regulation on facilities breeding big cats in captivity to prevent and detect any illegal trade from such facilities and deploy strengthened enforcement measures, reducing demand to combat illegal trade in big cat specimens, identification of big cat specimens in trade, and strengthening regional and international collaboration to address illegal trade in specimens of big cats. One element in paragraph 1.1 of the outcome document requires consideration by the Standing Committee. In paragraph 1.1, the Secretariat is invited to consider the merits of a resolution on illegal trade in big cats to strengthen the effective implementation and enforcement of the Convention with regard to illegal trade in big cat specimens, including a possible revision of Resolution 12.5, Rev. COP19, on conservation of and trade in tigers and other Appendix 1 Asian big cat species to increase the scope to make it applicable to all big cat species. Decision 19.93 directs the Standing Committee to consider the report submitted by the Secretariat and make its own recommendations as appropriate. The Secretariat seeks the guidance of the Standing Committee regarding the invitation in paragraph 1.1 of the outcome document, and the Secretariat notes that should the committee consider that there is a need for a resolution on illegal trade in big cats or a revision of Resolution Conf 12.5, Rev. COP19, the contents of the task force outcome document could potentially serve as a basis for this work. The committee may further wish to encourage all parties affected by illegal trade in specimens of big cat species to make every effort to implement the strategies, measures, and activities outlined in the CITES Big Cat Task Force outcome document as a matter of priority. The recommendations prepared for consideration by the Standing Committee are in paragraph 10 of the present document. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. With that, I open the floor for comments from members of the Standing Committee. I give the floor to Brazil.
Muchas gracias, señora.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, everyone. We would like to thank the Secretariat for having drafted document 39.3 and welcome the work done by the CITES Big Cats Task Force. We would also like to extend thanks to Uganda for having hosted the Big Cats Task Force meeting. With respect to the recommendation that there be consideration given to a resolution on big cats, we would like to recall that we do have a jaguars working group, which is indeed chaired by Brazil. We are going to have the opportunity to present what we have been doing when we come to that agenda item. It does not seem appropriate to us that there be discussion on a major resolution on trade in big cats until we have had the opportunity to consider the work of our working group. It seems to me that the purpose of that group is to look at the possible pertinence of a resolution specifically on jaguars. We would therefore suggest that the discussion on the possible adoption or drafting of a resolution on big cats be postponed to the next meeting of this Standing Committee, or that jaguars be excluded from a resolution on big cats. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Brazil. I give the floor to Poland.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Secretariat, for the report. The EU and its member states support the outcome document as well as the two recommendations. The alarming situation of international illegal trade in big cat specimens calls for collective action. We see a merit in a resolution to strengthen the commitment. We could consider as a way forward the possibility to revise Resolution 12.5
Ref COP19, on conservation of and trade in tigers and other Appendix 1 Asian big cat species, to be applicable to all big cat species and include the various aspects outlined in the outcome document of the Big Cats Task Force as appropriate, especially given the shift of different species in illegal trade. Nevertheless, it will be important in our view to maintain and address species-specific measures for tigers and other Appendix 1 Asian big cat species, as well as the newly to be included species. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Poland. Any more comments from members of the committee? Chad? I give the floor to Kenya.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Kenya would like to thank the Secretariat for the presentation of the document on Big Cats Task Force, and we want to appreciate Uganda for hosting the meeting and for the excellent participation of the Big Cats Reg states that participated in the meeting in April, followed by the meeting of the ACI, the African Cat Initiative, Canvas Initiative, and would like to support the recommendations presented in this document, noting that we consider it to be necessary for the revision for standalone resolution on illegal trade in big cats that will also align in the revision of Resolution 12.5, Rev COP19, but noting that in the revision of that resolution, we should not lose focus on paying attention to the specific species in Appendix 1 of the big cats that will require specific attention. So we could have that revision of the resolution, but with a specific mention to those key species that we consider will require special attention. So, Madam Chair, Kenya would again reiterate on the supporting the adoption of the recommendations as presented in paragraph 10 of the document. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kenya. I'll open the floor now for comments from observer parties and give the floor to Nigeria.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor. Nigeria would like to thank the Big Cat Task Force for their work in developing the outcome document, and also thank the Secretariat for document 39.3. Nigeria welcomes the majority of the recommendations outlined in the outcome document. However, with regard to the recommendation concerning the development of a single resolution on illegal trade in big cats, Nigeria would like to understand further what the perceived benefits of this resolution would be. Whilst we will welcome resolutions on individual big cat species, we are unclear of the rationale behind the development of a single resolution and are concerned that it may dilute the possible impacts of individual resolutions for the different species. Nigeria would therefore like to propose that consideration of this recommendation is delayed to Standing Committee 78 to enable further discussions on this matter. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nigeria. I am going to close the list now for observer parties. I give the floor to Malaysia.
Madam Chair, with regard to the proposal of a resolution on illegal trade in big cats, Malaysia is of the view that Resolution 12.5, Rev COP19, on conservation of and trade in tigers and other Appendix 1 ASEAN big cat species can be revised or updated to cover all big cat species. The existing resolution contains actions and measures to be taken by parties, relevant parties, range states, as well as the Secretariat, which have included illegal trade components, and in this regard, the contents of the CITES Big Cat Task Force outcome document could potentially serve as an additional input to revise the resolution. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Malaysia. I give the floor now to Tanzania.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Since the United Republic of Tanzania is taking the floor for the first time in this meeting, we would like to congratulate you for your election as the chair of the Standing Committee and the Secretariat for excellent preparation of the same, and the government of Switzerland for hosting us here in Geneva. Furthermore, Tanzania aligned itself with the previous speakers in wishing a quick recovery to Dr. Rosemary. Madam Chair, the United Republic of Tanzania commends the Secretariat for preparation of document SC77, Doc 39.3 on CITES Big Cat Task Force. As indicated in the document, in implementing this in 19.92 and 19.93, which were directed to both Secretariat and Standing Committee, the Secretariat convened the CITES Big Cat Tax meeting held in Entebbe, Uganda in April 2023. The task force was held back-to-back with the second range states meeting of the CITES CMOS Joint African Carnival Initiative, ACI, of which Tanzania participated. The United Republic of Tanzania welcomes the recommendation by the Secretariat containing document SC77, Doc 39.3, and encourage Big Cat's range states to consider implementation of the recommendation emanating from the CITES Big Cat Task Force meeting held in Uganda, attached as annex to document SC77, Doc 39.3. However, the United Republic of Tanzania is not in support of the proposal of possible revision of the resolution Conf 12.5, Rev COP 19, on conservation and trade in tigers and other Appendix 1 Asian big cats to have a common resolution to be applicable to all big cat species, since we believe that the threats facing big cats globally and even regionally are not similar. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanzania. I give the floor to the United States.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As with other speakers, we are not convinced of the need for a single big cat resolution, and in particular would align ourselves with the comments from Nigeria that we would want to understand additionally the perceived benefits of a single resolution. As other speakers have noted, the issues facing Appendix 1 big cats are quite specific in some respects, and so that would need to be taken into consideration in any development of a single resolution. So we feel that we would need more information on what the benefits would be and how that would go about. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, United States. I give the floor to India.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We congratulate the Secretariat for bringing out this document and organizing the Big Cats Task Force in Entebbe, and thank all parties who attended the meeting and brought out the outcome document. India has taken a lead in conservation of big cats in the region, with more than 70% of population of tigers and the only surviving population of Asiatic lions in India. We have been successful in our efforts to conserve these species in wild. The same conservation success stories also apply to other big cats found in India, namely the leopard and the snow leopard. We have also initiated first of its own kind, wild-to-wild, transcontinental translocation of cheetah for reintroduction program with kind support from the government of Namibia and South Africa. Madam Chair, on 9th April 2023, on the occasion to mark the 50th year of Project Tiger, one of the most successful species recovery programs in the world, Honorable Prime Minister of India launched an International Big Cat Alliance, IPCA, for the conservation of 7 big cats, namely tiger, lion, leopard, snow leopard, cheetah, jaguar, and puma. The alliance aims to reach out to all range countries of these 7 big cat species for strengthening global cooperation and efforts to conserve these species in the wild. Big cats, being the apex predators, can act as mascots for sustainable development and livelihood security, and the IBCA can usher in major efforts on environmental resilience and climate change mitigation while paving a future where natural ecosystems continue to thrive and gain centrality in the economic and development policies. So far, 16 big cat countries and several intergovernmental and UN organizations and IGOs have shown interest in partnering in the alliance, and India would like to take this opportunity to urge the big cat range countries and interested non-range countries, as well as IGOs and NGOs, to actively consider partnering IPCA. We also wish to support the suggestion of the Secretariat for including a possible revision of Resolution 12.5 REV COP 19 on conservation of and trade in tigers and other Appendix 1 Asian big cat species to increase the scope to make it applicable to all big cats. Further, we would also like to suggest deleting the words affected by illegal trade in specimens of big cat species in para 10B of the document. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, India. I give the floor now to Argentina.
Gracias, señora Presidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the first time we have taken the floor, so we would like to take this opportunity to congratulate you on your work and wish Roswiniama speedy recovery. We would like to say that we agree with our colleague from Brazil who represents our region on the Standing Committee. We don't think that it would be appropriate to include jaguars in this proposed resolution if there is agreement on the proposal made. And we would also like to say that we agree with the United States. Thank you.
Thank you, Argentina. I give the floor to Zimbabwe.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning. As a Zimbabwe, I feel that we need to exercise great caution when it comes to revising this resolution, and we also need to consult widely with the range states. It is important, Chair, to properly identify the big cats which need to be included under Resolution 12.5. Not all cats qualify to be included under this resolution. Therefore, a one-size-fits-all in this case does not apply. Different cats in different regions of the world are in different situations and circumstances with reference to threats. Therefore, they need different conservation actions. So there's no need to include all cats under this resolution. The cats must be identified by species name, those which needs further protection by this resolution. Thank you, Chair.
I give the floor to South Africa.
Thank you, Chair. South Africa participated in the Big Cat Task Force meeting in Uganda, and we would like to inform the parties that we are already implementing some of the recommendations from the Task Force outcome document. Our Cabinet approved the National Integrated Strategy to Combat Wildlife Trafficking, or in short, NISQUIT, for implementation. The strategy will empower law enforcement structures with the necessary tools to reduce and prevent the increasing scourge of wildlife trafficking in South Africa. South Africa aligns itself with the position of Tanzania, the USA, and others who do not support the recommendation in Para 10A in Doc 39.3. Thank you.
Thank you, South Africa. I give the floor to Uganda.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity. Uganda is taking the floor for the first time. We would like to also join others in congratulating you for chairing this important meeting. Madam Chair, Uganda wishes to thank the Secretariat for having partnered with us to organize the two successful meetings that were held in Entebbe, Uganda. We do also appreciate the parties that actively participated in these two meetings. We did generate very important recommendations and, that we think could be adopted and implemented to save the remaining populations of the big cats and the carnivores. Madam Chair, we as Uganda continue to host a number of big cats, but several of them are threatened. Their populations are declining, not necessarily from illegal hunting or trade, but a number of other factors that were outlined during the meeting. We therefore would like to appeal and request partners to work closely with us to ensure that we save the remaining populations. We also note from the submissions of the various parties that the recommendations being made could generate varying responses and views, and therefore Uganda remains open to further discussions regarding this matter so that we can have a harmonized position. We thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Uganda, and thank you for hosting the Big Cat Task Force earlier this year. I'm just going to summarize some of the things that I've heard. There doesn't seem to be any sort of consensus around agreement for the proposal for a resolution for all big cats. Some of the themes were that it's premature, that there's ongoing work, and also that the benefits or merits of having an all big cat resolution hasn't really been identified. There has been some folks who have are not supportive and like the idea of a species-specific resolution, and then there was one idea regarding maybe an all-cat resolution, but just focus on illegal trade. And so I'm going to open the floor briefly for comments from observer organizations, and then sort of summarize my findings and give a proposal to the committee. And so I open the floor to observer organizations. Okay, I'm going to give it to Senegal first, and then to the observer organization.
Merci. Thank you, Madam Chair. Senegal would like to commend the task force on big cats for their work and appreciates the document in 39.3. We shouldn't lose sight of the need to adapt our response to each species, so we cannot support a resolution on all species together. We would like a clarification from the Secretariat and the members of the task force on big cats about the aims of putting all of the big cats into this one resolution. We believe it is important to know the costs and the advantages of such a resolution before it is approved by the parties. Overall, Senegal believes that the task force on big cats should continue to consider this issue, and that a clearer proposal on a resolution on big cats should be submitted in the next Standing Committee meeting. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senegal. I will give the floor to Brazil as a committee member.
Gracias, señora Presidenta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just quickly like to say that, because I forgot to say it, that I spoke on behalf of the region of Central and South America and the Caribbean. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil, and I give the floor to the Zoological Society of London, London Zoological Society.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This intervention is on behalf of the Born Free Foundation, EASA, EIA, Four Paws, Panthera, Traffic, WCS, WWF, and ZSL. Many of our organisations had the opportunity to participate in the Big Cats Task Force meeting. We commend the task force for producing a detailed and actionable set of measures to combat illegal trade in big cats, and urge the Standing Committee to invite the parties to implement them as a matter of priority. We appreciate the discussion of a single resolution applicable to all big cat species. However, as parties have noted, while some measures to combat illegal trade in big cats can and should be enacted across the board, many factors driving the trade are nuanced and vary by species and by geography. requiring species-specific solutions. To that end, the Intersessional Working Group on Jaguars, in accordance with Decision 19.113, has been tasked with assessing whether a specific draft resolution on jaguars would be appropriate, taking into account the conclusions of a recent meeting of jaguar range states. The outcome of that discussion should precede and inform any decision about a single resolution on all big cats. Such a decision should also consider the increasing threat posed by illegal trade to African big cats that needs to be better addressed through CITES. Therefore, we support recommendations by parties that the Standing Committee defer the proposal for a resolution to SC 78. This allows time for the benefits and drawbacks of a single resolution to be assessed and to ensure that parties have the information they need to effectively address the needs of big cats. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, the Zoological Society of London. So I'm going to talk to the committee now, and so I have an alternate recommendation for recommendation 10A. What are your thoughts about requesting the Secretariat to issue a notification to the parties to invite perspectives on the possible resolution on all big cats and to prepare an analysis of the merits and drawbacks of developing a resolution for all big cats in consultation with the Animals Committee and bring its conclusions and recommendations to the Standing Committee at its 78th meeting? And I did not hear a lot of support for the amendment to recommendation B made by India to strike affected by illegal trade in specimens out from recommendation B. So I will read the recommendation one more time. Request the Standing Committee requests the Secretariat to issue a notification to the parties to invite perspectives on a possible resolution on big cats and to prepare an analysis of the merits and drawbacks of developing a resolution on all big cats in consultation with the Animals Committee and bring its conclusions and recommendations to the Standing Committee for consideration at SC 78. And then recommendation B, encourage all parties affected by illegal trade in specimens of big cats to make every effort to implement the strategies, measures, activities outlined in the CITES Big Cat Task Force outcome document as a matter of priority. Seeing no comments, the committee agrees to those recommendations. And with that, I close this agenda item, and we now move on to item number 44.1, Asian Big Cats Report of the Secretariat. And I give it to the Secretariat to introduce the document.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Document 41.1 has been submitted by the Secretariat and provides information on the implementation of Resolution Conf 12.5, Rev COP 19, on conservation of and trade in tigers and other Appendix 1 Asian big cat species and related decisions on Asian big cats. The present document does not address the results of missions conducted by the Secretariat concerning Asian big cats in captivity. This is reported upon in document 41.2, prepared for the present meeting. To facilitate its reporting to the Standing Committee, as reflected in the present document, the Secretariat issued notification to the parties 2023-91 in July 2023, inviting parties to report to the Secretariat on their implementation of the resolution and decisions. Reports were submitted by 9 parties, including 4 range states of Asian big cats. And these are compiled in Annex 2 to the present document and summarized in paragraphs 9 to 73. The Secretariat also received information from Interpol and from non-governmental organizations, which is highlighted in paragraphs 74 to 82. Key aspects contained in the reporting received and briefly summarized by the Secretariat in the present document includes conservation status and measures, enforcement measures and activities to address illegal trade in Asian big cat specimens, reduction of demand for illegally traded tiger and other Asian big cat specimens, Asian big cats in captivity, wildlife forensics related to Asian big cat specimens, photographic identification databases for tigers and others. The Secretariat also addressed the importance of annual illegal trade reporting in the document and the lack of specific information concerning seizure data related to illegal trade in Asian leopards. The Standing Committee is invited to consider the recommendations prepared by the Secretariat in paragraph 91 of the present document. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. I now open the floor to comments from the Standing Committee. I give the floor to Poland.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Secretariat, for the report. We take note of the document and support the recommendations as proposed by the Secretariat. We recognize the measures and best practices as reported by the parties, leading to the increase of tiger population and the decrease of illegal wildlife trade in Asian big cat species specimens in some countries. Regarding the recommendations, we particularly encourage other parties to submit their CITES annual illegal trade reports regularly and in a timely manner, including data on seizures of illegally traded Asian big cat specimens and also other big cat species specimens, as it is recommended in the outcome document of the Big Cat Task Force that we just discussed. Such information is crucial for monitoring and the evaluation of the illegal trade in big cat species. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Poland. I now give the floor to Indonesia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Indonesia is the habitat for endemic big cats of Sumatran tiger and also the Javan leopard, which are protected in accordance to Indonesian national law. Indonesia has carried out various activities related to the implementation of Resolution Conference 12.5 Ref COP90 on the conservation and of and trade in the tiger and other Appendix 1 Asian big cat species. These activities include population monitoring through the Sumatran white tiger survey programs, habitat protection and prevention of the felidae trade at national and global level. Indonesia fully committed and will submit related information as one of the concerned parties in response to the notification number 2023-91 as recommended by the Standing Committee. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Indonesia. I will now open the floor to observer parties for comments and give the floor to India.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Poaching and illegal trade in big cat body parts is a cause of concern, and to combat such crimes, India has a strong legislation in place. We have established a multidisciplinary agency with the Wildlife Crime Control Bureau, a statutory organization under the Wildlife Protection Act 1972. All big cat species found in India are listed in Schedule 1 of this accordingly provides them highest degree of protection. I am happy to inform that tiger population in India is increasing at a rate of 6% annually. India notes the assessing correctness in reporting of illegal trade is a challenge, especially with respect to Asian big cat specimens. The recommendations of the Secretariat in para 91B of the document inviting the Standing Committee to encourage only the parties affected by the illegal trade in Asian big cat species will exclude consumer states and drivers of illegal trade in these species from reporting seizure details in these species. We therefore suggest that the paragraph 91B of SC 77 Doc 41.1 be amended to delete affected by illegal trade in Asian big cat species and read as B, encourage all parties to include seizure data related to Asian big cat species in their annual illegal trade reports and submit their reports in a timely manner. Further, in order to ensure correctness of reporting of annual illegal trade data involving Asian big cats, we just suggest that a new para C be added after para B to read as direct the Secretariat to formulate a mechanism along with an appropriate agency and propose draft amendment to para 16 of Res Conf 11.3 Rev Cop 18 for ensuring correctness of the report mentioned in para B of SC 78 and submission of proposal by adoption in COP 20. With this recommendation, para C will become para D. We also note that the recommendations in present para C Roman small 1 appear to be repetitive in inviting range states of Panthera pardus with its Asian range explicitly in para C Roman small 1 A and implicitly in para C Roman small capital B to submit a report to the Secretariat on seizure data involving Panthera pardus. Therefore, we suggest that para C Roman small 1 capital A be amended to read as all range states of Panthera pardus within its Asian range to submit a report to the Secretariat on the conservation measures undertaken and poaching incidents detected and delete the words seizure data involving Panthera pardus within their territories. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, India. Can I have that draft recommendation again, the new addition? It was to direct the Secretariat to formulate a mechanism and
direct the Secretariat to formulate a mechanism along with an appropriate agency and propose draft amendment to para 16 of Res Conf 11.3 Rev Cop 18 for ensuring correctness of the report mentioned in para B of SC 78 and submission of proposal for adoption in COP 20. With this recommendation, para C, small c, will become para small d, and we also note that the recommendation in present para C, small Roman 1, appear to be repetitive in inviting range states of Panthera pardus within its Asian range explicitly in para small c Roman small 1 capital A and implicitly in para small c Roman small 1 capital B to submit a report to the Secretariat on seizure data involving Panthera pardus. Therefore, we suggest that para small c small Roman 1 capital A be amended to read as all range states of Panthera pardus within its Asian range to submit a report to the Secretariat on the conservation measures undertaken and poaching incidents detected and delete the words seizure data involving Panthera pardus within their territories and. Thank you, Madam.
thank you, India. I will give the floor now to South Africa.
Thank you, Chair. South Africa has included seizure data on big cats in our annual reports, and we will continue to do so. Chair, we stay committed to implement our National Environmental Management Biodiversity Act and its CITES and Threatened or Protected Species regulations. We support the recommendations in para 91, but we need to maybe see what India has suggested in writing, or at least very slowly, so that we can make a decision on that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, South Africa, and I give the floor to the United States.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We agree with the comments of many this morning that in support of the recommendations included in the document. With regard to the suggestions from our Indian colleague, it was somewhat difficult to follow a couple of them, but we certainly agree that that all parties should be reporting seizure data in their annual illegal trade reports related to seizures and illegal activities associated with Asian big cat species. So we would certainly support the amendments read out by the Indian delegate to recommendation B in paragraph 91. We're not sure we captured the other recommended edits, and so it might be useful to have those come back as a COM document for further consideration. But we certainly agree with the sentiment that it is important to have complete information in order to be able to make decisions here in CITES in general, and so would support the recommendation urging parties to submit data and to be responsive to requests from the Secretariat, whether it's direct requests or through notifications to the parties to submit reports so that we can have robust discussions in this and other CITES fora. Thank you.
Thank you, the United States. I'll open the floor to observer organizations. Okay, so WWF, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As this is WWF's first intervention, we would like to thank Secretariat for the hard work that went into organizing this meeting, and the Swiss government for its hospitality. We send wishes to Dr. Nam for a speedy recovery, and we commend you, Madam Chair, for stepping so ably into her place. I'm giving this intervention on behalf of AZA, Born Free Foundation, IESA, EIA, 4PAWS, Panthera, WCS, Wildlife Justice Commission, WWF, and CSL. It is deeply concerning that only 5 of 31 Asian big cat range countries provided information to the Secretariat in response to notification 2023/091, especially when illegal trade continues to be a major threat to Asian big cats in the wild. Unfortunately, this poor response is consistent with previous similar requests for such information. This lack of reporting means the Standing Committee does not have the evidence required to make appropriate recommendations, including fulfilling Decision 19.109 by determining whether any further time-bound, country-specific measures are needed to strengthen implementation of the Convention. Therefore, we urge that the committee directs range state party the committee directs range state parties that have not yet done so to respond to notification 2023/091 within 60 days of SC 77, and the Secretariat used this notification to produce a report for SC 78. Additionally, based on the information provided and drawing as appropriate on previous reviews, in documents SC 65, Doc 38, Corp 18, Doc 71.1, and SC 75.13. The Secretariat should develop draft time-bound country-specific measures for consideration at SC 78. In addition, we urge that the committee recommend that the Secretariat is mandated to commission a report on Asian big cats for each COPE, drawing on the example of the reports on African and Asian rhinoceroses, their status, conservation and trade that are produced by IUCN and traffic on behalf of the CITES in advance of COPEs. Not only would this reduce the dependence on reporting by parties, but a regional report suggests this would also help better address the transboundary elements of this international trade where national reports are more limited. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, WWF. And so, in summary, I am going to ask the delegate from India to provide his draft recommendation in writing to the Secretariat, and it will be produced as a ComDoc, and so we can take it up later on in the agenda. I did hear support for the recommendations in the document, and so I am asking the Standing Committee, the edit in recommendation B to strike out affected by illegal trade in Asian big cats, and then the recommendation in C1A to strike out and seizure data involving Panthera pardus within their territories, since it is redundant with B. Is the committee agree to those recommendations? And we can take note of all of the comments that were made on the floor by the various parties and observer organizations, and review the draft recommendation that will be provided by India in writing later on in the meeting. Sounds good. Oh, the United States.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We also would like to take on board the suggestion that that where possible, the Secretariat develop country-specific recommendations in its reports to this committee, so that we can have consideration of specific actions that parties can take to effectively implement the convention with regard to these species. So we think that that would be helpful where it's possible to develop those specific recommendations. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, so we have under paragraph 91, the Standing Committee is invited to A, note the information provided by the parties in response to notification to the parties 2023/91. Recommendation little b, encourage parties to include seizure data related to these species in their annual illegal trade reports and submit these reports in a timely manner. And recommendation little c, request the Secretariat to issue the notification to the parties. A, inviting range states of Panthera pardus within its Asian range to submit a report to the Secretariat on the conservation measures undertaken, poaching incidents detected. B, all parties that made seizures of specimens of Panthera pardus to submit a report to the Secretariat on seizure data involving Panthera pardus, and report on information to the 78th meeting of the Standing Committee, and invite the Secretariat, where possible, to develop country-specific recommendations reporting out to the Standing Committee on this item. And so we agree on those. Is there agreement on those? And we can take up the Indian recommendation later on in the meeting. All right, we will come back to this. We'll suspend this agenda item, and we will move on to the next one, which is 41.2, Asian big cats in captivity. I give the floor to the Secretariat to introduce the document.
Thank you, Chair. Document SC 77, Doc 41.2 has been prepared by the Secretariat and provides a report to the Standing Committee on the implementation of Decision 18.102, Rev Cop 19, and 18.108, Rev Cop 19, relating to the Secretariat's missions to 5 of the parties identified in document SC 70, Doc 51, with facilities keeping Asian big cats in captivity that may be of concern. The purpose of the missions was to gain a better understanding of the operations and activities undertaken by these facilities and to formulate recommendations for consideration by the Standing Committee. Background information relating to the process, including the reasons facilities keeping Asian big cats in captivity could be of concern, the terms of reference for the missions shared with the Standing Committee at its 75th meeting, the summary of information obtained from the parties prior to the missions in Annex 1, and engagements with parties in preparation for the missions are provided in the document in paragraphs 4 to 15. The document provides information relating to the missions undertaken by the Secretariat to Czech Republic, Laos People's Democratic Republic, South Africa, Thailand, and Vietnam in 2023. The Secretariat would like to express its appreciation to the authorities of the 5 parties for facilitating the Secretariat's missions and for their active engagements, as well as for WASA for its expert support and the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland for its generous financial support. The Secretariat confirmed that a new provisional date for the mission to the United States of America has been agreed. The Secretariat had further discussions with China relating to the mission and proposed dates for the mission to take place in January 2024. The Secretariat has not received an official letter of invitation from China in this regard. Paragraphs 20 to 78 provides an overview of the facilities visited by the Secretariat and the observations by the Secretariat. Information relating to legislative and enforcement measures implemented by the 5 parties are contained in Annex 2 to the document. The Secretariat's conclusions are contained in paragraphs 79 to 91, and the Secretariat would like to highlight the following. Critically endangered subspecies of tigers, Panthera tigris omoiensis in South Africa and Panthera tigris corbeti in Laos, PDR, Thailand, and Vietnam, as well as leopard, Panthera pardus de la Corre in Thailand, were reported to be kept in facilities or observed in some of the facilities, and these specimens could be important from a conservation perspective and may benefit from conservation breeding programs. Regarding implementation of Decision 14.69, the Secretariat notes that facilities keeping tigers in captivity still exist in the 5 parties with captive tiger populations that are not directly contributing to the conservation of tigers in the wild. The Secretariat did not find any evidence that the facilities visited are breeding tigers for their parts and derivatives, and most countries have carcass destruction procedures in place. It was noted that the majority of the facilities visited employ restrictions such as sterilization or keeping male and female tigers separated to control breeding. Legislative provisions to regulate the activities of facilities keeping tigers seem to be in place, including registration of the facilities, the keeping and reporting of registers, microchipping of individual specimens, except for Vietnam, inspections, and the destruction of carcasses. The strict implementation, monitoring, and enforcement of these provisions are needed, and a zero-tolerance policy should be applied, and any irregularities strictly penalized. Facilities with a large number of tigers and with no sustainable income require rigorous monitoring and control measures to reduce the risk of tiger specimens entering the illegal trade. Parties with facilities that breed large numbers of tigers and facilities housing large numbers of tigers could benefit from taking a more methodical approach regarding these facilities to improve their conservation and education value. The Standing Committee should note that due to the fact that the Lao People's Democratic Republic is currently subject to the Article 13 process, the recommendations that includes recommendations regarding monitoring of wild farms and related trade, the recommendations emanating from the tiger missions concerning Lao PDR are included in document SC77, Doc 33.10 for further discussion under that agenda item. The recommendations in paragraph 92 for consideration by the Standing Committee include recommendations directed to all parties in whose territories there are facilities keeping Asian big cats in captivity, as well as country-specific recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. And so for this document, I'm going to take comments and, on the recommendations for the document and the recommendations for the general recommendations. For all parties, and then we can transition and talk about the ones that are specific, are country specific. And so I now open the floor to the Standing Committee members for comments on the documents and the general recommendations for all parties. I give the floor to the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Chair. The UK welcomes the missions to facilities that have taken place and that the US mission is due to take place imminently. We would strongly encourage a mission to China in the near future and for this to be reported on ahead of 78th meeting of the Standing Committee if possible. We strongly agree with the recommendation in paragraph E2 directed to the Czech Republic for facilities that were not visited to be visited instead by the Management Authority and reported back on by Standing Committee 78. I would encourage this recommendation to be extended to the facility that wasn't visited in the Lao People's Democratic Republic. Whilst the UK agrees to the Secretariat's recommendations in paragraph 92, we would recommend strengthening the language across recommendations A, B, and G, where the language currently reads, encourage to be amended to urge in order to reflect the urgency of the need to implement the measures across the report. We would also strongly urge that these recommendations be made time-bound to require parties to report ahead of Standing Committee 78. Thank you, Chair.
The UK, the language change were for recommendations A, B, and J?
G.
G, okay. Any additional comments from members of the committee? I open it to observer parties for comments. I give the floor to India.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As we note that the Secretariat is yet to undertake mission to the countries where the facilities keeping Asian big cat species in captivity may be of concern, we therefore suggest addition of para H, inviting the Standing Committee to encourage parties where the Secretariat could not undertake tiger mission to extend invitation and provide all possible in-country assistance to carry out visits to the facilities identified as keeping Asian big cats in captivity, which may be of concern before SC 78. As the exercise of identification of facilities of concern was carried out by the Secretariat and reported to the SC 70, and that has been a long time ago, we therefore suggest addition of 2 more paras, I and J, inviting the Standing Committee to I, direct the Secretariat to carry out exercises to further identify facilities keeping Asian big cat species in captivity, which may be of concern. J, direct the Secretariat to report to the Standing Committee at its 78th meeting on implementation of paragraph H as suggested by India and progress with regard to these for consideration by the Standing Committee. Thank you, Madam Chair.
India, just quickly, recommendation J, direct the Standing Committee.
Direct the Secretariat to report to the Standing Committee at its 78th meeting on implementation of paragraph H as suggested by India and the progress with regard to these for consideration by the Standing Committee.
Okay, I will give the, okay, so I give the floor to Poland.
Thank you, Chair. We acknowledge the CITES Secretariat for conducting the Tiger missions and the parties concerned for the cooperation on these missions. We invite the remaining priority parties to welcome the mission by the CITES Secretariat to visit their captive breeding facilities identified as of concern. We support the general and country-specific recommendations as proposed by the Secretariat. We'd like to particularly highlight the need for proper implementation of Decision 1469, urging parties to restrict the captive population of tigers to a level supportive only to conserving wild tigers. From the outcomes of the missions, it can be seen clearly that the decision is not fully implemented in some countries. For effective implementation of Decision 1469 within the EU Tiger Guidance was adopted in 2022 to limit commercial trade in captive bred tiger specimens for conservation purposes only. We encourage parties to continue with management practices and controls towards the existing tiger breeding operations, including the registration, regular inspections, registration and unique identifications of tigers kept, tiger DNA sampling, control of the destruction of carcasses, and others. We also agree with the suggestions made by the UK. Thank you.
Thank you, Poland. I give the floor next to Vietnam.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Vietnam would like to start the intervention by expressing our appreciation to the work done by the Secretariat in Vietnam, in ASEAN Big Cats in general, and the mission to Vietnam early 2023 in particular. We agree on the observation and recommendation to enhance compliance monitoring, enforcement legislative provision, demand reduction, as well as approach to improve the conservation and education value from the existing tiger facilities. We also see the need to building the database in tiger in capacity from DNA analysis, type identification, as Vietnam is currently partnering with the WWF in similar work. Demand reduction in tiger is also a part of work has been led by Vietnam. Madam Chair, we would have two comments on the Secretariat recommendations. Firstly, Decision 1469 requests parties with intensive operation breeding tiger on a commercial scale shall implement measures to restrict the captive population to a level supportive only conserving wild tigers. We suggest the definition of commercial scale and a level of supportive to have a clear, detailed guidance on facility size, scope, and captive population, etc., to facilitate the implementation of the decision. Secondly, Vietnam would like to reconsider the recommendation relating to prohibit the establishment of new tiger facilities with narrow exemptions. The recommendations are made under paragraph 92 B and Z should be removed from the text for the reason that a decision to prohibit new captive facility is currently not regulated in any cited document. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Vietnam. I give the floor to the United States.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We appreciate the work that the Secretariat has done to undertake these missions and also appreciate the Secretariat's flexibility in working with us to schedule the meeting to the United States, and we look forward to welcoming that mission in early 2024. With regard to the recommendations in the document, we support the recommendations in the document, including the country-specific recommendations and also the amendments proposed by the delegate from Europe, as well as the delegate from India, and look forward to reviewing future reports on these matters. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, United States. I give the floor to South Africa.
Thank you, Chair. South Africa would like to thank the Secretariats for the mission to South Africa. The mission was conducted transparently, and the Secretariat was able to engage with NGOs, the provincial authorities, and most importantly, the facility owners and managers. South Africa has no objection to the recommendations in 92 as currently drafted. As South Africa has already initiated a process to review legislations with regards to keeping and breeding of tigers within the country, this review will address most of the recommendations in 92. The current exports of tigers from South Africa are for non-commercial purposes, and the facilities are registered with the management authorities, and we do keep registers and mark all the tigers in those facilities and are monitored. So South Africa supports the recommendations as currently drafted in the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, South Africa. And I'm going to invite observer organizations to, if they have comments. And so I give the floor to Thailand first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, Thailand would like to thank the CITES mission for visiting Thailand during February this year to get the better understanding about the issue, as well as for providing the helpful suggestions around this. As mentioned in the report, Thailand submitted in accordance with the implementation of the RESCON 12.5, and Thailand realized that this is one of our challenging tasks that require the regulatory measure to strengthen the control of the tigers in captivities. Currently, we are in the process of amending the relevant regulation to enable the strict measure for controlling the facilities, particularly the zoo that keep the big cats. Together with the database of captive tiger that includes both DNA information and individual tiger identity data, the new regulation will address the concern about the problem of illegal trade of the tiger related to the facility keeping big cats. The subordinate laws, including the ministerial regulations that govern the zoo operations, and among the requirements for obtaining a permit pertain in this law, there is the inclusion of the plan for wildlife population management that align with the zoo's utilization and capacities. This strategic approach will facilitate the regulation of the number of big cats held within the zoo facilities. And furthermore, the draft includes the provision that allow the establishment of species-specific requirements to address the specific concern as needed. For example, there may be restrictions imposed on the tiger population and subspecies that are bred within the zoo. The law was in process of public hearing in accordance with the Thai Constitution of the Kingdom of Thailand. However, with the newly elected government, the issuance of the subordinate regulation has been prolonged as a consequence of the government change. Regarding the recommendation in paragraph 92G, subparagraph 2C, we share the concern as previously referred by Vietnam. The prohibition of the establishment of the new facility is now in conjunction with the current laws, as well as the right of the people under the Constitution of Thailand. The overall measures related to the tiger breeding are restricted by the context of the Decision 1469. We thus support the deletion of this paragraph as Vietnam proposal. With the matter of similarity, we propose deletion of the second part of the sentence in 92B, subparagraph 4. Madam Chair, Thailand would like to emphasize our determination in addressing the problem by strengthening the legal measures and enhancing the captive tiger database to combat illegal trade of this big cat. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I give the floor to China, and I'm going to close the floor for comments right now, and we can pick it back up in a second.
Thank you, Madam Chair. China takes the conservation of Asian big cats very seriously and continuously strengthens efforts aimed at their conservation. China has continued to expand and deepen collaboration with other countries and participated in many initiatives to strengthen communication with the other range states and promote cross-border conservation actions. China has taken the lead or participated in international joint law enforcement operations such as Thunder series and promoted a crackdown on illegal trade in wildlife and its products at source or points across the supply chain and in the destination countries. China also organized training for developing countries in support of capacity building. As for paragraph 27 of Annex 2 to this document on page 33, China is baffled to read that establishing cooperation by law with China seems to present more challenges. The truth is that there is a well-established dialogue of long durations between the two neighbors. Cooperation with China has never been challenging, and we welcome all sincere overtures towards greater cooperations. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, China. I'm going to open the floor to observer organizations just to take a few comments. And so I give the floor to AZA.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm giving this intervention on behalf of AZA, Born Free Foundation, EASA, EIA, Four Paws, Panthera, Traffic, WCS, Wildlife Justice Commission, WWF, and ZSL. We're pleased to see the missions carried out this year to 5 countries having captive tigers facilities of concern, and to hear that plans are progressing for the missions to the US and China. We would like to thank the UK for funding these important missions. We welcome the report by the Secretariat and the recommendations within, and we support the text changes proposed by the UK. We also suggest the Standing Committee consider including language to better define what is meant by breeding for conservation purposes, by referring to this being applicable only to established, science-based population management programs, such as those following IUCN guidelines on the use of ex situ management for species conservation. Previously, some have argued that the lack of such a definition has inhibited the ability of parties to implement Decision 14.69. We encourage the committee to help resolve this issue at this meeting. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, ACA. Very briefly, IWMC, you have the floor.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam. I will be brief. As COP decisions are generally with regard to short or medium-term measures, we're rather surprised that the 14th COP measures are still with us. Normally, we would expect the content of that resolution to have been integrated into another resolution if it was still relevant. So Decision 12.5 as amended seems to me to be a good home for this one. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, IWMC. And so when I started this agenda item, I was trying to separate the general comments from the country-specific comments, and everything got sort of mixed in. And so I heard a lot of support for the comments, some of the comments that I heard on the floor. And so I'm going to go specific through the recommendations And if there are edits, please hit your flag, indicate, and we'll take the edit. I think that's the best way to go. And then we can sort of try to agree on them as we go through. Okay, so the UK actually did provide some edits on the language. So we start with 92, subparagraph A. The edit that I have captured is urge all parties in whose territory there is a facility keeping Asian big cats in captivity to I implement paragraph 1H of the resolution 12.5 Rep Cop 19 on the conservation of and trade in tigers and other Appendix 1 species, and II as stated in the document. Is there agreement with the committee on that one? Any additional thoughts or comments on that recommendation? Okay, so the committee agrees to the recommendations with the edit made by the UK. Recommendation B, again, the edit made by the United Kingdom, further urge all parties whose territory there is a facility that breeds a large number of tigers and facilities housing large number of tigers to consider taking a more methodical approach regarding these facilities to improve their conservation and education value. And then the rest of the recommendation is as stated in the document. Are there any edits to that or comments on that one besides the one made by the United Kingdom? Okay, the committee agrees on recommendation B as edited by the United Kingdom. Okay, for recommendation B, there was an edit by Vietnam and Thailand in subparagraph 4 to remove prohibiting the establishment of new facilities keeping tigers in captivity with narrow exemptions where warranted. How does the committee agree with that edit, or do they agree with the language as outlined in the document? Okay, I'm not hearing any support for the edit made by Vietnam and Thailand. Is that correct? All right, the committee adopts the paragraph recommendation B with only the edit made by the United Kingdom to change encourage to urge. C and D, I didn't hear any edits from the floor. Any comments from the committee on C and D? Little c, little d. Okay, the committee adopts recommendation little c and little d as outlined in the document. We're now going to move to the country-specific recommendations. And before I start, since I did give the instructions in the beginning to hold comments for the country-specific recommendations to later on. I want to open the floor for comments to country-specific recommendations. So for anyone who was following the instructions in the beginning, I now open the floor to the members of the Standing Committee if they have any comments on the country-specific recommendations, E through G. Any observer parties on comments on the country-specific recommendations? Observer organizations, any comments on the country-specific recommendations? Okay. Liberia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Since it is my first time taking the floor to speak, I would like to congratulate you for your appointment as chair of the presiding over this meeting. And I also like to applaud the government of Switzerland for also hosting us and thank the Secretariat for preparation and also the hard work put in to get this conference going. And I just want to look at on the country-specific recommendation, I'm looking at under the Czech Republic, where they have E and E with I, continue to collaborate with the state veterinarian administration to strengthen procedures relating to the disposal process, including improved monitoring to ensure complete destruction of carcasses. So that after collaborate, I would also like to include coordinate. Thank you.
Okay, so that is the only comment, additional comment I got on the country-specific recommendations, and we'll start to go through them now. And so we have E for the country-specific recommendation for the Czech Republic, one edit to add and coordinate after collaborate. So it reads, encourages the Czech Republic to coordinate and collaborate and coordinate with the state veterinary administration to strengthen procedures relating to the disposal processes, including improved monitoring to ensure complete destruction of carcasses and II as stated in the document. The committee agrees to the recommendation E with the addition made by Liberia. So for next, we'll take up recommendation F regarding the country-specific recommendations for South Africa. We did not have any edits, and we had support for the recommendations from the gentleman from South Africa. So the committee agrees to the recommendation F. G are the country-specific recommendations for Thailand and Vietnam. We have the edit from the UK that changes encourage to urge. We had an edit from Vietnam and Thailand who proposed a deletion of C, prohibit the establishment of new facilities keeping tigers in captivity with narrow exemptions where warranted. Do we agree to the UK edit urge? I heard some support for that on the floor. I'm gonna need some head nods, thumbs up, something from the committee, please. I saw one, I saw a nod. So we agreed to the edit from the United Kingdom and committee, the deletion of recommendation GC as proposed by Vietnam and Thailand. I saw no support. and some head shakes, so that recommendation is going to stay. And so the committee agrees to recommendation G with the edit from the UK that changes encourage to urge, and the rest of the recommendation remains the same. Thank you. Thank you for that time. I'm going to give the floor to the Secretariat to address the comment about time-bound reporting, as well as the additional draft recommendation from India regarding identifying new facilities of concern.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the time-bound reporting, as parties in the Standing Committee is aware, the CITES Secretariat issued a notification to obtain information from parties relating to the implementation of Resolution Conf 12.5. And so the Secretariat would like to propose that in that notification, we include a request to the countries that are affected by these visits to provide updates on the implementation of the recommendations, just to consolidate reporting on this matter to the next Standing Committee. So as part of the notification on the reporting on the ResConf 12.5, we will include the request to the parties to report on implementation. With regards to the proposal from India relating to exercise to be carried out to identify additional facilities that may be of concern, the Secretariat would like to propose that the Standing Committee come back to that consideration at SC 78 to allow the Secretariat to complete the decisions as adopted by COP19, and if there is a need to identify further facilities, that be put forward to COP20 as a decision. So those are the Secretariat's proposals with relating to those two items. Thank you, Chair.
And so I think the only additional recommendation would be to encourage parties not yet visited to extend an invitation to the Secretariat in line with Decision 18.102, Rev Cop 19, to facilitate reporting to SC 78. And there seems to be agreement on that one. So the Secretariat, the committee agrees to the additional draft recommendation proposed by India. I give the floor to Switzerland.
Thank you, Chair. I think we also heard a request from one of the range countries to have more guidance on what they should do, how can they evaluate their breeding facilities that do not contribute to conservation of tigers. So if there is guidance out there that this could be provided to those parties, or if there's no guidance, maybe the committee may ask the Secretariat to prepare such guidance for the committee to evaluate. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Switzerland. And I give the floor to the nomenclature expert.
Thank you, Chair, and sorry for this sudden interruption, but I noticed that recommendation G refers to the subspecies Panthera tigris corbetti. Unfortunately, at COP18, the parties adopted an updated cat nomenclature which no longer recognizes corbetti as a valid subspecies. Therefore, the appropriate text would probably be specimens referable to the mainland Southeast Asian tiger lineage. Thank you, Chair.
Can you just repeat that reference, please?
It would be tiger specimens referable to the mainland Southeast Asian lineage.
Thank you. And that will be noted. And then I hear a new recommendation as proposed by Switzerland to invite the Secretariat to provide guidance to parties who have captive breeding operations that do not contribute to conservation. Okay, so the new recommendation would be for the Secretariat to provide guidance to parties on how to evaluate the conservation aspect of captive breeding operations for big cats. And there seems to be some support, but I'm going to give the floor to the United States.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just following up on the Switzerland's recommendation, and this may be overcome by events, but in the event the Secretariat is requested to develop definitions or guidance with regard to conservation, breeding, commercial scale, et cetera, we would suggest that guidance be developed in consultation with the Animals Committee. Thank you.
So a revised new recommendation would be the Secretariat, in consultation with the Animals Committee, develop guidance for parties who have captive breeding operations to help them in evaluating the conservation aspects of their breeding, captive breeding. Subject to external funding. So the recommendations, there are no recommendations in this document for Lao PDR. Those recommendations will be taken up and considered in SC 77 Doc 3310. With this, I have concluded this agenda item, and now we move to SC 77 Doc 33.1, Article 13 in application of Article 13 in the Lao People's Democratic Republic. And I give the floor to the Secretariat.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm speaking to document SC 77, Doc 33.10 on the application of Article 13 in Lao PDR. And this report describes the actions taken by Lao PDR to implement the recommendations agreed by the committee at its 74th meeting and reiterated at its 75th meeting. As indicated in the report, Lao has reported progress in some areas, in particular with regard to the preparation of the non-detriment finding for Dalbergia cochinchiniensis and Dalbergia oliveri, and the publication of a zero export quota for the export of the specimen of these species from Lao PDR. Also, it's worth noting that the revised wildlife law entered into force just over 1 month ago, and hopefully this is a step in the right direction. The Secretariat received the official translation of the law earlier this week and has not had a chance to take a look at it in any great detail. As we noted at the meeting in Panama SC 75, the Prime Minister's decree on international trade in wild fauna and flora was issued in October 2022, and therefore, based on the progress of these two new acts, the Secretariat has placed the legislation of Lao PDR in Category 2. It was until now in Category 3, and this will be reported under Item 31 later this week. However, and as you can see, the legislation is in Category 2 because there are still some gaps that need to be addressed, and we understand that Lao PDR is in the process of addressing those gaps. So beyond the progress on Dalbergia and national legislation, the results in terms of ensuring compliance with CITES and in implementing the recommendations of the Standing Committee seem to be limited, in particular when you consider the efforts invested by Lao PDR, as well as the level of support provided by partners and the CITES Secretariat. The Secretariat is particularly concerned that there appears to be very limited results from law enforcement efforts, with no arrests or prosecution concerning illegal trade or trafficking involving CITES-listed species reported for the last 2 to 3 years. The Secretariat is also concerned about the continued breeding of tigers in captivity and the lack of clear provisions for managing dead tiger specimens, as we just discussed under Agenda Item 41.2. In addition, the Animals Committee at its meeting in June requested the Secretariat to investigate the issue of legal acquisition of founder stock for captive breeding
facilities for Macaca fascicularis, and the Secretariat is following up with Lao PDR in this regard. In view of these observations, the Secretariat invites the Standing Committee to maintain and update the recommendations agreed at SC 74, with some further amendments that I'm going to explain now. First of all, we agree that perhaps it's appropriate to change the word shall in some of the recommendations to should, in line with the changes that have been made in other recommendations under Agenda Item 33. In addition, the Secretariat recalls that at SC 75, the Standing Committee agreed to consider a recommendation to suspend trade in specimen of all CITES listed species for commercial purposes at its 77th meeting if progress on the implementation of the recommendations would be considered insufficient. As noted in the report, and just now, the Secretariat is of the view that the results of the efforts reported by Lao PDR are insufficient. The Secretariat therefore invites the Standing Committee to consider a recommendation to suspend trade for commercial purposes in specimen of all species, of all CITES listed species, until Lao PDR has substantively achieved all the recommendations agreed by the Committee. We suggest deleting the wording in brackets import and export in view of the discussions earlier this week. As discussed under item 41.2, the Secretariat proposes additional recommendations with regard to the breeding of tigers in captivity based on the observations and findings of its mission earlier this year. With respect to the recommendation concerning Dalbergia, the Secretariat notes that this recommendation has been implemented. Therefore, the specific recommendation to suspend trade in specimen of Dalbergia SPP can be withdrawn. The last sentence in paragraph 39 of the document should therefore be deleted. Apologize for any confusion caused. The Secretariat finally recommends that the Standing Committee request Lao PDR to submit a progress report to the Secretariat 90 days before SC 78 for the Committee to review progress by Lao PDR in implementing the recommendations at its 78th meeting in 2025. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. I will now open the floor to comments from the Standing Committee. I'm sorry, I give the floor to Lao PDR.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm glad for the chance to speak at the Standing Committee meetings again. On behalf of the Government of Laos, I express my deepest gratitude to the CITES Secretariat, as well as the development partner, non-government partner, for their invaluable technical and project support in fulfilling our CITES commitment. We strongly anticipate the support from the CITES Secretariat under the Compliance and Assistance Program, generously funded by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We have proposed activity redesign and are hopeful for swift project finalization to enhance our compliance with CITES. Regarding to the export of Dalbergia from Lao PDR, we conducted a comprehensive NDF study. As a result, we have implemented a zero export quota for source code WAY for Dalbergia specimen in 2022 and 2023. We acknowledge the assessment and recommendation from the CITES Secretariat regarding to the Lao national legislation for CITES implementation. To this end, we have provided English translation of the recently approved and promulgated wild animal law. The English version of the new aquatic animals and fishery law will be submitted as soon as translation is completed. I am delighted to declare that an important decision undertaken by the Lao government that under the two revised law, Lao will not permit for trade in wildlife in category 1, including the carcasses, parks, and product. Furthermore, the trade in wildlife, including the cascade park product, which are listed in the cited appendix, shall be carried out in accordance with the law, convention to which Lao PDR is a party, and relevant international agreement. Furthermore, we are currently reviewing the CITES decree, which was approved in November 22, to align with the amendment wild animal law and address any remaining gap, ensuring full CITES compliance. And the revised CITES decree will be endorsed by the government of Laos within the first quarter of next year, 2024. We are actively cooperating with the CITES Secretariat and our partner in this endeavor. Additionally, we have identified critical regulation to be updated and developed to ensure sustainability and legal acquisition under the amended wild animal laws. So these encompass regulation related to, first, wild animal legislations and species listing. Second, wild animal hunting and management of hunting tools. Third, management, monitoring, inspection of wild animal captive facility, namely zoo, farms, rescue center. And fourth, human-wild animal conflict. Fifth, wild animal release and reintroduction. Sixth, wild animal technical guidelines on wild animal breeding and releasing. And seventh, file related to non-criminal wild animal violation. We will collaborate closely with the CITES Secretary and our development partners to ensure that regulation effectively address legislative gaps in implementing CITES in Laos PDR. So drawing on successful cooperation and coordination between CITES Management Authority and Scientific Authority in conducting NDF study for Darburg, so we have further developed a draft MOU for mutual collaboration on the CITES. So this draft is currently undergoing review and scheduled for signing at the end of this year. Additionally, we are actively working on boosting capacity of the CITES SA to support the law enforcement authority in Laos and in authentical wild animal and providing scientific certificate on relevant matter. This effort is part of the US-funded project implemented by Trace Forensic Network and WCS. We acknowledge the finding and recommendation from both CITES Secretariat and the CITES Asian Big Cat Mission in Laos PDR this year, particularly concerning to the modeling of wild animal farm and related trade. Wild animal farm operator and relevant government agency have been invited recently to participate in dissemination meeting to acknowledge the result of the CITES Secretariat mission to Laos and to collaboratively discuss and devise measures for addressing this issue together. So we already have outlined the following steps to put a recommendation action and to address this compliance issue. First, we are cooperating with Malaysia colleagues to future develop the tiger DNA and strike patient database with a focus on improving database management capacity. We are also in the progress of formulating a decision to establish the National Advisory Committee tasked with implementing CITES recommendation. So this committee, including key organizations, namely CITES Secretariat, UNODC, IUCN, Free the Bear, LCTW, WCS, WWF, and other development partners with working group number 15.7. And third, funded by the UNODC SAFE project, we have disseminated related law, regulation, CITES recommendation concerning to wild animal farms to farm operator. We confirm that breeding activity are not permitted in on tiger farm in Laos PDR, and there will be no authorization for the establishment or expansion of the new captive tiger facility. And finally, Laos has continued an effort in implementing outreach campaign aimed reducing demand for tiger use and combating other illicit activity related to wild animal. We value the feedback from CITES Secretariat regarding to our enforcement effort. So the Department of Forest Inspection as the primary agency responsible for wild fauna and flora enforcement in Laos has provided the following update. Since September 2022, 3 cases of illegal hunting by local people in the national parks of Laos have been brought to court. After a thorough investigation, no incident of transnational organized crime related to wild animals have been identified or reported. So relevant enforcement agencies under LAWIN are actively collaborating together for the information. And report received by DOFI from 5 provinces of Lao PDR have revealed incidents of local people engaging in wild animal hunting and the trade at roadside. Though no connection to transnational organized crime were found, we face challenges related to public awareness and the law, and they are dependent on natural resources for their livelihood. Additionally, limited resource equipment are constraining our capacity in addressing this issue effectively. Lao remains is collaborate with NGO like UNODC, Free the Bear, LCW, WCS, and WWF to strengthen wildlife law enforcement and rescue initiative in Lao PDR. I will give some example. On October 6, 2022, the world was made aware of a significant size of rhino horse at a Singaporean airport intended for Lao PDR. This incident gathered international media attention. In response, the Lao MA urgently reached out to our colleagues, Singaporean CITES Management Authority, seeking for any available information that could help link this case to the wildlife trafficking network operating in Lao PDR. We kindly request any information that could establish connection to the wildlife trafficking network in Laos. Rest assured, if such link is found, Laos will definitely take a rigorous and lawful measure, including a serious criminal sanction. Lao PDR remain totally dedicated to preventing, combating transnational wildlife crime. We hope for the sectorial trust and support as we strive to fulfill our obligation and commitment under CITES. So regarding to recommendation from concerning to the trade in live Asian elephant, so we have a lot of implementation as our China already make an intervention this morning. So as a President also Lao, we are already imposed a yellow export quota for live Asian elephant from now on. And second, our management authority of Lao PDR already established communication with the CITES Management Authority of China. So we have confirmed that the facility hosting and import domestic elephant maintain good condition, and majorities of elephants are in good health. So China and Laos are closely maintaining close communication, cooperation to address this issue. So we also sent a notification letter to relevant zoo operator in China, urging them to monitor and facilitate the returns of Lao elephant. We are currently conducting a review of cooperation contract to ensure compliance with the wild animal law and CITES regulation. And then, as part of our planned CITES compliance assistance program, and with the financing backing from the private sector and CITES Management Authority of Laos, we assess and scrutinize elephant trade contract, conduct a visit to China to oversee and resolve this issue related to export Asian elephant. So within the framework of the CITES compliance project, we are in the process of formulating the strategy to manage captive Asian elephant population in Laos. So this will involve sanctioning system or legislation, making of elephant in captivity in accordance with decision 18.227. Laos will continue to outreach campaign for demand reduction and law dissemination to inspire the public to value wild animal and conservation against its illegal and unsustainable use. To sum up, Lao PDR has already made significant and substantial progress in fulfilling the CITES commitment. But all of these progress are not fully accounted in SC Doc 33.10. So we wish to emphasize our strong commitment to implement the recommendation of the Standing Committee in addressing the remaining compliance issue. We firmly request the Standing Committee to cancel or withdraw the recommendation to suspend trade in species of on-CITES list species for commercial purpose at this meeting, and grant us more time to fulfill our serious commitment and obligation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Lau. I'd just like to thank the interpreters for giving us an extra 10 minutes of interpretation. And so I'm going to park this agenda item for right now. We have a lunch break, and based on the progress that we've made this morning, we're going to have an extra 2 hours of session in the afternoon from 5:15, 1 hour and 45 minutes, from 5:15 to 7 o'clock. And hopefully that will give us enough time to have discussions and also get caught up for Thursday morning. Thank you guys for your flexibility. Enjoy your lunch, and I'll see you at 2 o'clock.